That was fast. Thank you again for having us, Esteban, Dr. Gomez. It's wonderful to be back. I was actually here 15 years ago with my wife in Guayaquil, so it's a lovely city. So I changed the topic ever so slightly, why I perform medial UKAs, and I'll go through it fairly quickly. These are my boring disclosures. It's obviously the environmentally responsible thing to do, right? Do just a part of a knee. Look at how much less metal that is. So, I mean, that should be the main reason we do it. That's not very funny, right? It's not very funny in English. Okay, so why do I perform unis? Well, it's a great operation. You get higher patient satisfaction and outcome scores. And I've listed a few different studies on the bottom of each of these slides, but there are many, many more. These are just a selection of high-quality studies I thought were appropriate in referring to this. It's got better range of motion, better stair climbing, better kneeling, lower pain scores, shorter hospital stays, greater patient preferences when we put them head-to-head. I don't want to, because Dr. Rojas is going to go into the registry aspects. We'll just touch on very few registry issues. And here's the New Zealand Joint Registry showing much better, good to excellent results. In one head-to-head study, this is a long-term outcome study, and I have sort of selected specific studies, but this one shows an even better survivorship with the uni. I don't think that's necessarily reflective of all of them. When you go head-to-head again, at 3-year follow-up, improved scores in every different area. Multi-center, 3 centers, Dr. Brown published better outcome scores and much lower complication rates, so about a third the rate of complications. Another important aspect, and something we see more and more, particularly in New York and the United States, is patients want to go back to sports. And what we don't see as much of is a return to sports after a knee replacement. Having said that, with the uni, you see in both of these 93% and 80% return to sports after a partial knee replacement. Jade Parvizi published another one saying that only 50% of total knees go back to their preferred sport, so that's a much lower bar. This is hot off the press. This is August 2019. I guess it's not even on the press yet. But UKA patients, this is chest, lumbar, and heel skid area, at higher function, expectations were more likely to be met. Their satisfaction scores in this smaller study were fairly similar. If you see durable results all over the world, this is a Spanish study, a French study. There's one issue that everyone always raises, and that's the durability concern. And I want to reflect on 3 aspects to that when you're asked about it. So, number 1 is to revise for unexplained pain. 2, the survivorship is very biased, and I'll point out one specific registry study that you can use to address this. And number 3, of course, we're not as good at things that we don't do as often. So if you're in a bigger group, we should really try and funnel these down to a few individuals who do most of them. So unexplained pain alone, there are lots and lots of reviews on this topic, 11 times more likely to be revised for pain. Similar results from the Australian registry, UK registry, showing a significant portion of their revisions, 23% in the UK, they're not even sure why, just pain. There's a bias. So if we look at who gets a uni these days, they're younger age, they're male, and they have a higher functional score. So this study, this is from the Australian Joint Registry, and I just want to point this out because this is very interesting, and I'd be interested to know who actually uses this data when they talk to the patients. But if you look at men under 55 in the Australian Joint Registry, their failure rate at 11 years is 12.9%, and at 10 years. That is not what we typically tell people. So when you start comparing unis to that cohort, I think you see that it's actually fairly similar, perhaps even better. Surgeon volume is a significant issue, and I think we all reflect on we're not as good at something we don't do. We see that in all of the outcome studies and registries. And so that's something we need to address. I think we've improved the prosthetic designs. One of the designs that was used early on in the US was the Mako design. They went with an inlay and they've improved it. The Oxford design for the mobile bearing, they've added an extra lug onto the thermal component, which has been helpful. So there's continued evolution of the design of the components, which I think will help address some of the long-term outcomes. And lastly, on this topic, I think survivorship should not be our only criteria for success. I would much rather have a high-functioning, high-quality uni for 20 years than have a low-functioning, all I can do is walk around and do menial activities of daily living and have it last longer. So I think the debate needs to really change. And if we look at Bob Bourne's study from the Canadian Joint Registry, and this is perhaps one of the most quoted studies in the last 15 years, saying that 24% of people still have symptoms when performing one of their desired activities. A uni may be one of the best ways to address this low satisfaction score. Just want to touch on 3 quick aspects to technique, design, guidance, and robotics. I think you can get great outcomes with conventional instrumentation. There are lots of companies. Each company's now got their own robot. I don't think you need it. The 10-year survivorships have been excellent. And these have been on both sides of the pond. Here are some European studies showing similar excellent outcomes up to 20 years. If we look at Sebastian Perat's data, they showed good results, be that with a fixed bearing or a mobile bearing, although it is important to recognize the failure rates are slightly different. The failure rates occur at a slightly different time in a slightly different manner, and you can address those proactively by actually doing the surgery slightly differently. And low revision rates, again, noted in those. We tried to improve the revision rate, or pardon me, the outcomes of our unis when I was a resident. We had this fiddly little iron guide that was used for the Oxford, so we designed a special fluoro-guided customized guidance system, and as you'll see with all other guidance systems, we showed that it took a little longer. We put it a little more accurately in a position that we weren't sure it was the right position, and it didn't change the outcomes. And that's been shown over and over, so less outliers, or in some cases still a significant number with guidance. And if you look at most computer-navigated pooled studies, it doesn't really seem to affect the outcomes. PSI, similarly, no improvement in the outcomes. And robotics, despite what they'll tell you, doesn't seem to show any significant benefit in terms of the outcomes. It takes about 20 more minutes. And what's interesting about robotics is we're seeing the same thing over and over with robotics is none of the companies are actually publishing their 3-dimensional accuracy, which I think is a real issue with the way they're being sold. I think there is one issue that we found with robotics at our center, and that was if there's one thing they do seem to help with, that is the learning curve. So you get better a little bit quicker with robots, and perhaps the lower volume person is able to get a little better accuracy. So patient selection, I didn't really touch on it, but I think you want isolated medial compartment disease, you want a mobile knee, you want an intact ACL, and you want a motivated patient. I actually don't isolate those to young males. I actually think it's an excellent procedure for an older female with isolated medial compartment. So I'll do those often in that group as well. Here's a young lady. She had a previous knee scope. This right knee is now 10 years out from an Oxford. She had her knee scope and she had SONC, or spontaneous osteonecrosis, on the medial side. And she got on a bike the day after surgery. So when I did her uni, she went home and did exactly the same thing after her uni. And you can see that result on the right side, and she's just post-op on the left side. So I think she was a good indication for her uni, and I think a total knee would not have been the procedure for her. And fine. That was it. Maybe not this one. So here are our areas of improvement. And that's my conclusion. These are my happiest patients. I think unis are a wonderful procedure. Thanks.